Welcome to Finding Brilliance in the Bees. I'm Clarissa, and this intimate video series, which is part of She Rocks That College Live, is all about the integration of academics and life and the beauty that emerges from the shame and failures as you step into your worth as a non-traditional college student. I'm compelled to share this video series with you after having numerous conversations with college women over the past 3 years who, behind closed doors, are craving deeper, raw, and real conversations around what it's like to fight for a better life through your education. That's why this series fully embraces conversations around mental health, perfectionism, unreal expectations, grades, relationships, because the sole purpose of this series is to create a safe place for you to grow and heal from all of the programming around what it means to be smart, what it means to be a good student, and what it means to be brilliant and successful. So, if you're watching, this is for you. The college woman who feels like nobody else is going through this shame and failure, the frustration and anger, and all of the days in between when you feel like you're not enough. I'm here for you, so let's be brave and have a conversation around what nobody else in the lecture halls is talking about. And so you don't miss out on a single episode, I recommend subscribing now. We'll also be sharing additional resources and hosting communal conversations with each episode right here on YouTube as the episode airs live. So make sure you turn on your notifications so that you don't miss out on everything that I have planned for you inside of the chat. The title of this very first episode is Shame, Failure, Not Good Enough, and Other Ways We Self-sabotage. One of the greatest things about, or one of the hardest things I should say about being a college student, especially a non-traditional college student, is we've been fed a lot of expectations and beliefs over the course of decades that we did not consciously choose. And now that we're adults and we can think for ourselves, many of us have not taken the time to question some of the things that have been placed on us. We've carried these beliefs and expectations on our bodies every day as though we're just putting on our bras. They've become so ingrained in us that we are completely oblivious to them. We're not even aware of the havoc that they're wreaking on our ability to step into our worth as students. But if you're looking at your life right now and your whole world feels like it's filled and consumed, and feelings and thoughts of not being smart enough, not being productive enough, good enough, young enough, determined enough, if you feel like you're not doing enough, like you're not achieving enough, or like you're not progressing through your major or your courses fast enough, if you're finding that it's really hard to know what you really want, what you enjoy, what makes you happy, you're having trouble making decisions, and you're constantly wondering and comparing yourself to how everyone else is doing it and how they're, moving through college. If you're having trouble trusting yourself and being able to navigate around all of the failures without making it mean that there's something wrong with you, I want to welcome you to the club, baby, because you are a product of a flawed system that has convinced you that there is some ideal level of intellectual perfection that we're all supposed to live up to. And not only does this system expect us to be perfect, but that perfection also needs to be achieved with little to no effort. We're all supposed to make it look easy and like we're naturals. It's no wonder that so many of us are struggling with procrastination, fear of failure, anxiety, low self-confidence, and self-sabotage. As students, we get taught that any deviation from the status quo means we'll never reach success or that we're going to fall behind everybody else. And where did we all learn this from? Were we born with these expectations? Were we born with these beliefs? And what do we believe that we'll lose if we don't live up to them? And that is really what is at the root and the core of shame. And no other place is shame more prevalent than in the education system. Shame is one of the greatest barriers to learning because we have all become more concerned with appearing learned and appearing smart and appearing like we have it all together and like we know everything that's going on than we are about engaging in our own learning and in our own growth and in our own progress. Brené Brown, who is a researcher that's devoted her life to studying shame and its effect on our ability to interact and connect to one another, describes our experience with shame so beautifully in her book, I Thought It Was Just Me, But It Isn't. And in it, she says, shame comes from outside of us, from the messages and expectations of our culture. What comes from inside of us is a very human need to belong, to relate. We are wired for connection. It's in our biology. As infants, our need for connection is about survival. As we grow older, connection means thriving emotionally, physically, spiritually, and intellectually. Connection is critical because we all have the basic need to feel accepted and to believe that we belong and are valued for who we are. Shame unravels our connection to others. In fact, I often refer to shame as the fear of disconnection, the fear of being perceived as flawed and unworthy of acceptance or belonging. Shame keeps us from telling our stories and prevents us from listening to others tell their stories. We silence our voices and keep our secrets out of fear of disconnection. It's no wonder that so many of us feel alone and unsupported when we go through college. And as women in education, we feel shame the most when our realities, right, our day-to-day lives, what we're experiencing personally, competes with society's version, right? What society is dictating to us about who we should be as students, what we should be as students, and how we should be as students. And shame hits us the hardest when our unwanted identities are being exposed or threatened to be exposed. And when I talk about unwanted identities, what I am referring to is any characteristics that undermine our vision of our ideal selves. So it's anything that goes against how we want to be perceived in society. It's anything that follows the sentence or sentences, I don't want to be seen as, I don't want people to think of me as, oh my God, what are people going to say if they knew that I failed, if they knew that I had to change my major, if they knew that my relationship is struggling while I'm going through college? What does it say about me that I can't maintain a relationship and get good grades? What does it say about me that I have to spend another year in college or that I lost my scholarships? Shame is the voice of perfectionism. It's not the quest for perfection that is so painful. It's failing to meet the unattainable expectations that leads to the painful wash of shame that prevents us from stepping into our own brilliance as students. And if you've ever felt like you were not enough at any point in your higher ed journey, I want you to know that you don't need another video on how to create the perfect study schedule, nor another planner, nor another app to help you stop procrastinating. What you need to learn is how to build your resilience to shame. And shame is a survival emotion. What that means is that when we experience shame, it throws our body into fight or flight mode, which is reaction mode. And most of us have never been taught how to react to shame in a constructive way. So instead, what we do is we're all out here destructively moving through negative emotions, through shame, and feeling completely out of control in our own lives. Shame resilience, as described by Brené in her book, I Thought It Was Just Me, is the ability to recognize shame when we are experiencing it and be able to move through it with the appropriate tools so that we move through it in a constructive way that allows us to maintain our authenticity and grow from our experiences instead of being held back by them and instead of self-sabotaging with them. Resilience is our capacity to recover quickly from the difficulties that we may be experiencing as students, especially as non-traditional students who are working, who might be moms going back to school, who are in relationships, who are commuting to and from, who have other experiences outside of college. I think that the way that the college education system is set up right now is that it believes that it still exists in a vacuum, right? That we're somehow supposed to forget that we have lives outside of the classroom. And so if we're not careful, if we don't become really aware of society's expectations of us as students in the world that we live in now, we can easily begin to self-destruct, to self-sabotage, and to prevent ourselves from achieving what it is that we set out to achieve when we enrolled in college in the first place. And so, the conversation that I want to have through this series is all about how we build that resilience to shame. And I'm going to be using the framework that Brene Brown shares in her book. I thought it was just me, but it isn't. And in it, she shares 4 elements to building your shame resilience. And I'm going to walk you through what those 4 elements are now, because it's really going to lay out the framework for this video series. So element number 1 is the ability to recognize shame. That means that we need to understand what triggers our shame and how we react to it. And normally we react to shame in 3 different ways, and I'm going to talk about those 3 different ways right now. The first way is that we move away. So whenever we have an experience that triggers our shame, we will try to hide, keep secrets in order to protect how we want to be perceived by society. The second way that we react to shame is we move towards it. So what that means is that we go above and beyond to try to people please and seek approval and maintain the status quo so that we can keep that image of how we want people to see us. And then the final way is that some of us will move against it. So when we experience shame, we might use shame to fight shame. We get aggressive. We try to find any way, shape, or form to try to regain back our power of how we want people to see us. So that is element number 1, is recognizing when we're in shame and how we react to shame in ways that are not serving us. The second element is practicing critical awareness, which is the practice of knowing when we're in shame and why we're experiencing shame and how it's impacting us. That's really what critical awareness is all about. It's knowing that something exists and that something is happening and understanding why it exists, why it's happening, and how it is affecting our ability to be able to move through the world. Element number 3 is reaching out or creating a network of friends, support systems, colleagues, therapists that we feel safe sharing our shame in. And then the last element is knowing how to speak shame or learning how to talk about our pain, how to describe to another person what we're feeling and why we're feeling it. And then also being able to learn from it and express to that other person what we need in that moment. In this video series, I'm going to be using these 4 elements to talk about my personal experiences with shame in higher ed, what I learned and had to relearn in order to step into my worth as a non-traditional college student. And this first video is all about the shame surrounding not being smart enough. And so I'm going to be talking about situations that triggered my shame, triggered moments where I was trying to protect being the smart girl, where I didn't want to be perceived as not being smart enough. I'm going to talk about how I reacted to shame in those experiences and how they affect my ability to see the kind of academic success it is that I wanted at the moment, and how I was able to move through that and adopt a new identity of being smart enough and worthy enough for academic success. A lot of these experiences are things that I haven't shared before or that I might not have shared in this much detail. It's scary for me to talk about this because, again, these are moments that weren't my best moments, where I didn't behave probably in a way that people would have deemed appropriate, but it's at the time I didn't have the tools to be able to move through shame. And so my goal with this video series is that hopefully through me sharing my experiences and sharing what happened to me, that you can learn and recognize that you might be in shame, and I can possibly give you tools to be able to move through it so that you can stop holding yourself back in college and stop behaving in ways that don't support the goals it is that you have for yourself. So let's dive into my unwanted identities. So when it comes to the thought of not being smart enough, what really comes up for me is I don't want to be perceived as being too dumb to get into college, or too dumb to not be accepted into a program. I don't want to be perceived as another dumb Latina girl who's never going to make it out of the hood. I don't want to be perceived as only being high school smart, but not being college smart, not being medical smart, not being everyday smart. I didn't want to be perceived as a girl who didn't get into medical school, who wasn't smart enough, who was a complete failure. And very early on, I had my very first experience of not being smart enough, and that was in 8th grade. If you don't know me, I am the daughter of 2 immigrants. My parents are both born in the Dominican Republic. I'm firstborn American, so I was born here in the US, but I grew up very, very Dominican. I didn't really watch a lot of American shows. I didn't listen to a lot of American music. I lived in a community in Rhode Island, in the hood, where a lot of other Dominican and Hispanics and Latinos lived. It's definitely an underserved community. We were poor. We didn't have the best school systems. And if you wanted to get a good education, you had 2 options for high school. You could either go to a private school, which my parents could not afford, or there was this school called Classical High School, which was the smart kids school, right? So you had to take an entrance exam to get in. And if you got in, it meant that you were the smartest of the smartest. And I took the exam 8th grade so that I could get in for 9th grade. And I did not pass the exam. And that was my very, very, very first experience of feeling like I wasn't smart enough and feeling like I needed to protect the image of being the smart girl. Up until this point, I was an honor roll student. I, was considered teacher's pet. I was, the smart girl in my class. And not getting into this high school really threatened that identity, the identity of being a smart girl. And so what I started to do was I started to lie. When people asked me why I didn't go to classical, I would tell them, I didn't even bother taking the test. I wasn't interested in going to that school, but it was all a lie. I was lying because I didn't want people to know that I didn't pass the exam. The second moment that I felt like I wasn't smart enough was when I got into college. I went to a private school, Providence College, and we had to sit down and meet with our advisors freshman year. And I told her that my goal of going to college was to be able to go to medical school, and I was going to be a pre-med major, which meant I was either going to major in biology or chemistry or biochem or something in the sciences, because that's what you do when you want to go to medical school. And my advisor told me that I should probably major in health policy, because typically students who come from my neighborhood who are minorities don't do well in the science field. And if I wanted to have a better chance of being able to get into medical school, then I should probably take an easier major, which was at the time health policy at the program that I went. And the way that I dealt with that, my image of being smart being threatened in that very first experience in college was by rebelling, right? So I began to move against. I basically said, screw you, in my own mind. I didn't say it to her, but I basically said, screw you. I'm going to pick biology as my major. I'm going to do this. And very quickly, I realized how ill-equipped I was to succeed in a bio major at this private college because of the education system that I was brought up in. I didn't have the skills, the tools. I didn't know how to look for the resources it was that I needed to be able to succeed. And by the time I was a junior, I had failed out of 7 classes. And that was really when I began to believe that, okay, I might have been like high school hood smart, but I definitely wasn't college material smart. And I was really in shame during this experience. And the method that I used to try to protect my image of being smart was to hide and to also move against. So I began to not talk to anybody about how my college experience was going. I don't think that any of my close friends really knew that I was struggling really bad in college. I avoided professors. I avoided my classrooms. I avoided studying. I did all of these things to try to protect my image of being smart by doing all of these things that didn't help support me in my academic experience. And instead, what I was doing was hurting my chances of being able to get into medical school. I wasn't passing any of my classes because I wasn't looking for the support. Because to me, having to ask for help, having to ask for that support was admitting that I wasn't smart enough, that was admitting that I wasn't capable. And I was not going to give that advisor, I was not going to give my professors the joy of being proved right. And so the other thing that I would do is I started to really distance myself from my culture and distance myself from where I grew up in, because in my mind, girls who come from where I come from, Dominican girls, are seen as they're just going to be someone's housewife, right? They're not smart, they're fast, they get pregnant at 15. And so I started to really whitewash everything that I did and really distance myself from my culture, because I didn't want to be seen as another dumb, fast Dominican girl who wasn't going to amount to anything or ever get out of the hood. And I started to compare myself to the girls that I went to high school with, and thinking that I was so much better than them. And like, even just thinking about like how I behaved and the way that I thought makes me sick to my stomach. I'm ashamed that I was ashamed of where I came from. And none of that was helping me in any way, shape, or form. The next moment that I felt like I wasn't smart enough was when I had to have the tough conversation with my academic advisor my junior year about what I was going to do, what my plans were. And she looked me straight in the face and said, I understand that you want to go to medical school, but with these grades, you're not going to get in, and you're going to struggle when you're there. You're not where you need to be in order to succeed. And basically what she was saying in my mind was, you're not smart enough. You don't have what it takes to succeed in the medical field. Why don't you try something that's easier? And a week later, I ended up changing my major to health policy. And one of the things that I've never talked about is that I actually had to fight to change my major so late in the game. So I changed my major at the end of junior year, and I changed it to health policy which was that major that was recommended to me my freshman year of college. And the director of the health policy program would not accept my request to change. He basically said, I'm so sick of, students coming in here who are pre-med, who, when they're failing pre-med, they want to come and switch their major to health policy and they have no interest in it. And I had to go and basically beg to be put back into the program. And if that's not shameful enough, I don't know what is. So I ended up completing that entire program in a year, so a whole major in a year, and I had to stay an extra semester. So when I walked across the stage, having graduated but not having completed the credit, and that in itself again just reinforced to me that I wasn't smart enough to be there. And it was super embarrassing when my parents were like, open up your black thing that the diploma comes in, and I was like, it's not in there. I don't have my diploma. I graduating, I'm here at the graduation ceremony, but I'm not graduating until the end of the summer because I have to take all these classes in order to get my diploma. Shortly after that, I decided that I was going to become a nurse practitioner, and I started applying to a bunch of accelerated nursing programs, and I got declined from all of them because my grades weren't where they needed to be. And so that was another moment where I felt like I wasn't smart enough, like I wasn't capable, that I wasn't going to achieve everything that I wanted, and I was letting my parents down who came here to give me a better life, and I'm sitting here squandering all of it. And I had to, kind of humble myself and realize that I wasn't going to get into these programs with these grades. No matter where I applied, who was going to accept me with a 2.6 GPA? Nobody. So I decided that I was going to apply through the encouragement of Elvis, who's my husband, to the community college, which was the worst thing in my mind. Community college, that's for people who are really dumb. Community colleges are for, English as a second language students who, aren't smart enough to get into a 4-year college. How embarrassing that I'm going to get my nursing degree from a community college. And for a long time, I struggled with saying the words that I got my nursing degree from a community college, that I have an associate in nursing, because again, that went against the identity or the perception that I wanted other people to have of me, that I was really smart, really successful. Oh my God, I got most likely to succeed in high school. I don't want anyone to know how badly I struggled in college. I don't want anyone to know that I failed over 7 classes. I don't want anyone to know that I had to resort to going to a community college in order to be able to become a nurse. That was the worst thing in my mind, to have people see me as not being the best and not being the smartest. And I did things, I said things to people, I thought things about my own culture, about my own family, about my cousins, about my friends, to try to make myself feel better. I put other people down to try to make myself feel better. And that's what shame does to us. Shame turns us into the worst versions of ourselves. It doesn't allow us to connect to other people, to be vulnerable, because it is an emotion that triggers in us a fight or flight response. We go above and beyond. We're desperate to do anything to try to keep up our image. So much so that freshman year of college, I almost sent in a forged version of my transcript to a school that I wanted to transfer to, because I knew that if I sent them the original grades that I had, that I wasn't going to be accepted because their requirement was a 3.0 GPA. And that was the lowest of the lowest that I went in regards to trying to make sure that no one perceived me as not being smart enough. And talking about this here on YouTube, online, in front of I don't know how many people who are going to see this, maybe people who actually know me in real life, is hard to have to admit all of that. But what I have learned through having conversations with other women who are in college, other women who are experiencing right now the same thing that I experienced when I was going through my higher ed journey, is that it's not just me. So many of us are experiencing this. So many of us are afraid to ask for help. So many of us are trying to protect an image that is unattainable. We have so many expectations, so much pressure put on us to try to be perfect, to have it all together. And it's just unrealistic. It's unrealistic and it's unattainable. And that's what I want to start talking about, is this education system is freaking flawed. What is a grade anyway? What does all of this mean? What does it mean to be smart? Like, I don't understand how we're judging people in college. Like, a grade does not determine the potential that somebody has. The fact that I went to a 2-year college versus a 4-year college doesn't mean that I'm a bad nurse or that I'm not as smart as 4-year nurses. And the biggest thing that I had to move through in order to step into my worth as a student, to realize that I am smart enough, that I am capable enough, is how realistic my own expectations were at the time. You know, the fact that I had failed over 7 classes, that I couldn't get into an accelerated nursing program, that I had to go to this lower community college, was where I needed to be. But because I was trying to live up to what society deems as being a good student and being smart and being successful, I didn't realize that I needed more support, right? My expectations were unrealistic for the education system that I came from in high school. I wasn't given the tools. Doesn't mean that I'm not smart enough. It doesn't mean that I'm dumb. It doesn't mean that I'm incapable. I just didn't have the skills to succeed. And had I learned that earlier on, had I been able to move through shame in a way where I could have constructively supported myself, I would have reached out and gained the necessary tools. But because I associated needing help and not getting straight A's right off the bat and not being a natural at college classes, I could not allow myself to ask for help, because in my mind that meant that was me admitting to the fact that I wasn't smart enough, and I did not want to have that identity put on myself. I wanted to be perceived as having it all together all the time and being smart. And so when you're moving through shame, one of the things that you need to understand is, what are the expectations that are being placed on me? Where are these expectations coming from, and who are they serving? They certainly weren't serving me. I don't know who they were serving in the bigger picture, but they certainly were not serving me. They were not allowing me to step into my own brilliance by choosing to continue to believe and live up to those expectations. The reality was, I needed support and I needed help, and needing support and needing help does not mean that you are stupid. It does not mean that you are dumb. It does not mean that you will not achieve the success that you need. All it means is that you need support. All it means is that this is the path that you need to take to really step into the identity of being smart enough. And these are conversations that are really hard to talk about. These are conversations that I don't think colleges are taking into consideration. The education system is changing. A higher percentage of students are non-traditional. A higher percentage of students are students who are returning back to college at the ages of 25 and older. And we have different values. We care about different things. We have other stuff going on in our lives that are more important than just getting A's and B's. And so we need to start questioning, what is the education system expecting of us? And is that realistic for where we currently are in our lives and what we value and what our priorities are? Do those expectations conflict with each other? our expectations of what we can really do based off of where we are in our life and the expectations of society that thinks that we are these perfect students who just go to school in a vacuum and that life is somehow not connected to any of it. When we are creating our goals, academic goals, when we're picking our universities, when we're picking our programs, when we're picking whether or not we're going to go to school full-time or part-time, if we're going to go to a community college or a four-year college, if we're going to do an online program or an on-campus program, are we describing and picking goals based off of what other people want us to be or who we want to be and the kind of life that we want to live? What are we so afraid of? It's another question that you need to ask yourself. If someone perceives me as not being smart, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? How does it affect me? And you also need to start thinking about, how are you trying to control other people's perceptions of you? How are you trying to do that? And is that serving you? Me hiding from professors, skipping classes, putting the people around me down, disconnecting myself from my culture. None of that was helping me in any way, shape, or form be a better student. It was harming me because it made me lose confidence in who I was, and it made me feel less human, and it made me feel like I needed to be somebody completely different in order to be worthy and in order to be valuable. But I tried to use all of those methods to try and control other people's perceptions of me, people who I'll probably never see again in my life, who have no say, footing, anything on my life right now. But I did all of that, and I moved out of character in order to protect this image of being the smart student. And I want to know, how many of you are experiencing this right now? How many of you are going through this right now where you are acting out of character, feeling out of control and not like yourself because of these unrealistic and unattainable expectations that the education is putting on us right now? Let's talk about it in the chat. Let's talk about it more online. Let's be open about what we're really going through and stop trying to be this level of perfection that doesn't exist as a student. I'm going to be talking a lot more about this in different aspects, different areas of my life throughout this series. The next episode is going to be all about the idea that life has no place in the lecture halls and the other lies that the education system tells us about who we need to be as students, about what it means to be successful, about what it means to be a good student. I hope that this episode resonated with you, and I hope that we continue the conversation. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.